Ontario Premier Doug Ford advises Conservative Leader Pierre Poilievre to put differences aside and help Prime Minister Mark Carney's agenda as part of a, quote, Team Canada approach against U.S. tariffs.
A transgender festival on Vancouver Island was cancelled after anti-Israel activists demanded the organizers take a stance on the Middle Eastern conflict.
The Air Canada strike is set to continue despite the Liberal government declaring the protest illegal. Hello Canada, it's Tuesday, August 19th, and this is the True North Daily Brief. I'm Isaac Lamoureux.
And I'm Geoff Knight.
We've got you covered with all the news you need to know. Let's discuss the top stories of the day and the True North exclusives you won't hear anywhere else. Ontario Premier Doug Ford called on Conservative Leader Pierre Poilievre to work with Prime Minister Mark Carney after praising Carney's handling of U.S. trade relations. Ford said, quote, work with the Prime Minister in reply to a reporter asking if he had any message for the Conservative leader.
Premier, today is Pierre Poilievre's by-election. If he gets elected, I'm wondering, what's your advice to him going into the fall sitting of the Parliament?
Work with the Prime Minister.
How so?
Let's Team Canada. Let's put our political stripes aside and start working together collectively on large infrastructure projects, on other areas that he can cooperate with the government.
Trade tensions with the U.S. dominated the questions posed to their premier minutes after his meeting with the Prime Minister concluded. Ford was asked if he would be taking a trip down to Washington, D.C. anytime soon, to which he replied, quote, not likely. Ford used the bulk of his remarks to praise Carney's approach in dealing with Washington. He said, quote, he's doing an incredible job. He's working collaboratively with 12 other premiers and myself as Team Canada. I challenge anyone, try to deal with Donald Trump. While Ford said, quote, nothing happens immediately from such meetings, he stressed that both Ottawa and Queen's Park were aligned on cutting regulatory burdens, supporting domestic industries, and keeping Canada competitive as trade tensions escalate. So, Geoff, many online have been very critical of Ford this year. What are some other examples of Canadians complaining that he isn't conservative?
Yeah, Isaac, many Canadians online are criticizing Ontario Premier Doug Ford this year, especially with his praise for Liberal Prime Minister Mark Carney amid U.S. trade tensions. Critics on platforms like X have pointed to Ford's $51.5 billion education budget for 2024 to 25 and his $100 billion Highway 401 tunnel feasibility study, arguing he spent more than almost any other premier, contradicting conservative fiscal restraint. Another grievance is Ford's handling of the Greenbelt land swap, where 7,400 acres were removed for development despite public backlash, which is seen as favoring developer cronies over conservative values of limited government. The National Conservative versus Ford dispute during the 2025 federal election has fueled complaints, with Toronto MP Leslyn Lewis accusing Ford of undermining Pierre Poilievre's campaign by not endorsing him, leading some to label Ford as a liberal hype man. Online voices also decry Ford's retention of the carbon tax framework, despite opposing cap and trade, and his reluctance to cut taxes aggressively, with ex-users arguing he's drifted from the small governance ethos Poilievre champions, especially after Ford's call for cooperation with Carney. A Vancouver Island festival celebrating transgender ideology has been cancelled following demands from activists that organizers take a public stance on the war in Gaza. Transfest, scheduled for August 16th, was promoted as a celebration of transgender identities and music. In a statement posted to Instagram, organizers said the event was called off after the municipality of Sanok revoked permits amid growing controversy. Organizers wrote, quote, sadly, a small group of dedicated pro-Palestinian activists have decided to demand that Transfest take a stand on the war in Gaza. They added that founder Francis Riley, quote, refused to capitulate to their demands. Public comments on Transfest's Instagram page identified Aaron Dever, one of the festival's sponsors, as a source of contention for being a Zionist. Dever is the founder and inaugural chair of transgender studies at the University of Victoria, past president of the Jewish Federation of Victoria and Vancouver Island, and a former board member of Hillel BC. Several commenters argued that Dever's past relationship in Jewish community organizations tied to Zionism clashed with the festival's values. So, Isaac, what other instances in recent years do we have of anti-Israel activists pushing their weight around in the Pride movement?
Yeah, Geoff, in recent years, there have been multiple instances where anti-Israel activists have injected the Israel-Palestine conflict into Pride events and LGBTQ spaces. For example, the cancellation of Transfest on Vancouver Island, as you mentioned, is only the latest example of anti-Israel activists inserting the Gaza conflict into LGBTQ events. Similar disputes have repeatedly surfaced at pride parades and queer spaces across Canada, where Jewish participants and groups with ties to Israel have faced protests, exclusion, and even violence. In Montreal, this summer's Pride Parade saw violent escalation. A woman was arrested after throwing nettle extract, a liquid described by police as smelling like urine, at Jewish groups Gaza and the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs. Pride organizers initially banned the Jewish groups from marching, accusing them of spreading hateful discourse, only reversing their decision after pressure from MPs. In Toronto, anti-Israel activists have disrupted the Pride Parade for 3 consecutive years. Protesters wearing keffiyehs and waving banners likening their cause to an intifada blockaded the march, forcing police to briefly halt the parade. Some protesters used imagery directly associated with Hamas propaganda, and Green Party leader Elizabeth May was spotted carrying a watermelon symbol, a motif commonly used in anti-Israel demonstrations. These disruptions have also affected corporate backing. 5 major brands, including Google, Adidas, and Home Depot, pulled sponsorships from Toronto Pride this year, with Jewish groups pointing to the Pride Toronto's past anti-Israel statements and decisions as reasons for the decline in support. Outside of parades, the world's oldest gay-friendly bookstore, Glad Day in Toronto, hosted a drag queen-led event that openly glorified Hamas and spread disinformation denying sexual violence during the October 7, 2023 massacre. The event highlighted the growing Queers for Palestine movement, despite Gaza ranking among the worst, if not the worst, region in the world for LGBTQ rights. Taken together, these incidents show a clear pattern. Anti-Israel activists have repeatedly used pride platforms to advance their cause, often at the expense of Jewish LGBTQ groups, and sometimes even undermining the unifying purpose of the pride events themselves. After Prime Minister Mark Carney's Liberal government declared the Air Canada flight attendant strike illegal, Canadian Union of Public Employees national leaders claim they are willing to face arrest and charges to continue the protest and demand compensation for unpaid work. Liberal Jobs Minister Patty Hajdu announced she was invoking Section 107 of the Canada Labour Code to direct the Canada Industrial Relations Board to intervene. The board is an independent administrative tribunal which interprets and applies labor laws in such disputes. During a press conference in Ottawa on Saturday, Hajdu said she asked the board to, quote, assist the parties in reaching a settlement by imposing final and binding arbitration and to extend the terms of the existing collective agreement, previously struck with CUPE's involvement. The union representing 10,000 flight attendants at Air Canada, in a briefing note, said its members voted 99.7% in favor of strike action. The union, on behalf of the flight attendants, demands to be paid for tasks such as reporting for duty, getting dressed in uniform on site, and performing duties such as critical safety-related duties. The Canada Industrial Relations Board ordered the union and its officers to immediately cease all activities that declare or authorize an unlawful strike. Individual attendants have been directed to return to work, and CUPE leadership has been ordered to call a halt to the strike publicly. Hajdu said, quote, my job as Minister of Labour isn't to take sides during labour disputes. It's to give the parties the tools that they need to reach a fair and timely agreement while keeping the best interests of Canadians at heart. And that's why I intervened today. Hajdu said the intervention was necessary as both parties were, quote, nowhere close to reaching a collective agreement after 2 days of Air Canada flights being grounded. Air Canada offered a 38% compensation increase over 4 years, including partial ground pay and wage increases, though CUPE rejected the offer. During a press conference at Pearson Airport, CUPE National President Mark Hancock said the union was willing to be arrested, face fines, and go to court to continue the strike.
There's no limit. We're going to stay strong. We're going to stay committed to making sure that those workers can do the job that they love doing and actually be able to afford a roof over their heads, to afford caring for their families. And if it means folks like me going to jail, then so be it. If it means our union being fined, then so be it. We're looking for a solution here. Our members want a solution here, but that solution has to be found at a bargaining table.
So, Geoff, opposition parties seem to be rarely actually united on this one, but what are politicians saying about this?
Yeah, Isaac, opposition parties like the Conservatives and NDP appear to be united in criticizing the Liberal government's handling of the Air Canada flight attendant strike, with politicians voicing their concerns over labor rights and government intervention. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has slammed Prime Minister Mark Carney's administration, calling the use of Section 107 of the Canada Labour Code an overreach that tramples workers' rights, arguing it prioritizes corporate interests over fair negotiation. NDP leader Merritt Stiles, in a letter to Premier Doug Ford and a statement on August 17th, urged the federal government to reverse the back-to-work order, accusing Jobs Minister Patty Hajdu of union busting and betraying collective bargaining principles. She emphasized, working people deserve respect for their labor, not legislated silence. Stiles further criticized the imposed arbitration as undemocratic, noting the 99.7% strike vote, and called for a fair deal at the bargaining table, echoing CUPE National President Mark Hancock's resolve to face arrests. Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet has joined the chorus, labeling the decision a federal attack on Quebec workers at Air Canada, demanding regional labor autonomy. This unity reflects a shared narrative that the Liberal intervention, despite Hajdu's claims of neutrality, undermines labor rights, with opposition figures leveraging the strike to challenge Carney's leadership amid economic tensions.
That's it for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. You can stay on top of new episodes every weekday by subscribing to the Daily Brief on iTunes and Spotify. Also, while you're at it, make sure to hit us with a 5-star rating and please leave a review.